It happened in broad daylight, under a cloudless blue sky, where hundreds of neighbors gathered beside a worn stretch of farmland expecting to witness the final embarrassment of a poor black boy everyone had already declared a failure. They laughed so hard they could barely breathe as they watched him release buckets of wriggling tilapia into shallow irrigation ditches instead of planting another expensive crop. Some pointed, others shook their heads, and a few whispered that desperation had finally stolen his mind. Yet before that same growing season ended, those very ditches would produce a miracle so astonishing that agricultural experts would travel for miles to study the land, while harvest records that had stood for generations would fall one after another. The laughter that once echoed across the fields would be replaced by silence, tears, and a lesson no one in that county would ever forget. If you believe kindness is stronger than cruelty, forgiveness is greater than revenge, and hope can change a person's destiny, please like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share this story with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue sharing journeys that remind us all that second chances are worth believing in. Colton Hayes had grown up on 28 acres of exhausted farmland that seemed to disappoint every person who ever tried to work it. His father had died from a sudden illness when Colton was only 10, leaving his mother, Meredith, to carry impossible burdens with worn hands and an unbreakable heart. Every sunrise found her working beside her son beneath the bright morning sky, refusing to surrender even when debts piled higher than hope. The fields had once produced healthy corn and soybeans, but years of unpredictable weather and declining soil had stripped away both fertility and confidence. Their neighbors quietly believed the Hayes family would eventually lose everything, and many had already begun discussing who might purchase the property once the bank finally claimed it. Colton carried those whispers like invisible stones in his pockets. Every trip into town reminded him that people measured him by what his family had lost instead of what they still possessed. Still, he never allowed bitterness to settle in his heart. Instead, he spent long afternoons at the county library reading agricultural journals that few people ever opened. While others his age relaxed after school, Colton studied irrigation systems, soil biology, aquaculture, and sustainable farming. The librarian often smiled as she watched him leave with stacks of books almost too heavy to carry, wondering why someone so young was fascinated by subjects most adults ignored. One afternoon he discovered an article describing integrated farming systems where fish and crops helped each other thrive. The concept fascinated him. Fish waste naturally enriched water with nutrients, reducing dependence on expensive fertilizers while improving soil health. Farmers in scattered regions had experimented with similar techniques, but almost no one around his county had ever considered placing fish inside irrigation ditches that wound between crop rows. The more Colton researched, the more convinced he became that the neglected ditches crossing his family's property could become living streams of opportunity instead of stagnant channels collecting weeds. His excitement met immediate skepticism. Even Meredith struggled to imagine how fish swimming through muddy trenches could rescue a failing farm. She never mocked her son, but worry clouded her gentle smile. Every remaining dollar mattered. They could barely afford seed, much less an experiment that sounded unbelievable. Yet Colton patiently explained every article, every scientific principle, every calculation he had scribbled into worn notebooks. He showed how nutrient-rich water might nourish vegetables naturally while the fish themselves would eventually become another source of income. Meredith looked into her son's determined eyes and recognized the same quiet courage that had once lived inside her late husband. She agreed to trust him. Word spread faster than wildfire beneath the bright afternoon sun. The county feed store became filled with laughter as customers repeated the story of the ditch fish farmer. Some joked that Colton planned to teach fish how to climb corn stalks. Others claimed poverty had driven him insane. Even respected farmers who had always treated Meredith kindly gently advised her to stop the project before the entire community laughed harder. Their concern sounded sincere, yet every sentence carried the same painful assumption: the Hayes family had already lost. Ignoring every insult, Colton spent weeks cleaning clogged irrigation channels. Sweat soaked his shirt beneath endless daylight as he removed rocks, strengthened banks, and carefully managed water flow. Every movement reflected months of preparation. He introduced healthy tilapia fingerlings into the ditches and monitored water quality daily. He planted vegetables along the channels, believing the nutrient-rich irrigation would feed the roots while the fish remained healthy below. It looked unusual, even ridiculous, but Colton understood something many critics never bothered to learn. Innovation often appears foolish until results become impossible to deny. The first weeks tested every ounce of his resolve. A sudden stretch of unusually hot weather lowered water levels, forcing Colton to redesign portions of the irrigation system. Then heavy daytime rains threatened to wash young fish away. Several neighbors slowed their trucks simply to watch him struggle through the mud, convinced failure was finally arriving. Each setback could have broken his spirit, yet every obstacle became another lesson. Instead of complaining, he adjusted water gates, reinforced channels, and continued studying every change with patient determination. Meredith noticed something extraordinary happening long before anyone else did. The vegetable plants nearest the fish-filled ditches grew taller than any she had ever seen. Their leaves shimmered with rich color. The soil remained moist longer without becoming waterlogged. Within weeks, neighboring fields showed ordinary growth while the Hayes property displayed rows of vibrant green stretching beneath the afternoon sunshine like ribbons of hope. Meredith quietly thanked God every morning, though she remained careful not to celebrate too early. People began driving past more frequently. At first they expected disease, hidden fertilizer, or simple luck. Instead, they discovered healthy plants unlike anything surrounding farms had produced. Local agricultural suppliers wondered why the Hayes family had stopped purchasing expensive fertilizer. Curious extension agents visited the property during daylight hours, collecting soil and water samples. Their laboratory results surprised everyone. Natural nutrients circulating through the irrigation system were supporting remarkable plant growth while improving soil quality. The laughter gradually disappeared. Then came the harvest. Families gathered again beneath brilliant skies, this time expecting merely respectable yields. What unfolded instead stunned the county. The vegetable harvest exceeded every previous record on comparable acreage. Tomatoes grew larger than anyone remembered. Peppers overflowed from crates. Squash filled trailers until there was barely room to walk between them. Every acre seemed determined to erase years of hardship in a single season. Yet even that astonishing harvest told only half the story. When Colton finally harvested the mature tilapia from the irrigation ditches, local restaurants immediately offered premium prices for fresh fish raised through sustainable methods. Farmers who had mocked the experiment now stood silently watching truck after truck leave the Hayes farm carrying vegetables and fish alike. Income arrived from 2 successful harvests produced on the same land. The farm that had hovered near foreclosure suddenly possessed enough revenue not only to pay every overdue bill but also to repair aging equipment, restore neglected acreage, and establish savings for future seasons. Agricultural universities soon requested permission to study the operation. Professors praised the efficiency of combining aquaculture with irrigation under local conditions. Journalists arrived carrying cameras instead of ridicule. They asked Colton the same question again and again. How had a young farmer accomplished what experienced professionals never attempted? His answer remained remarkably simple. He explained that people often reject unfamiliar ideas before understanding them. He admitted his experiment involved risk and hard work, but he believed knowledge meant little unless someone found the courage to apply it. He thanked his mother first, saying her willingness to trust him mattered more than every scientific article he had ever read. Meredith stood nearby wiping joyful tears from her face as applause echoed across the farm. Not everyone found peace so easily. Several neighbors privately admitted feeling ashamed for their cruel jokes. One older farmer named Grant Holloway carried that regret more heavily than anyone else. He had mocked Colton publicly at the feed store and repeated hurtful stories throughout the county. Pride kept him away for weeks after the successful harvest, but guilt refused to let him rest. Finally, on a bright autumn afternoon, he walked slowly across the Hayes property with his hat clutched tightly in weathered hands. He expected anger. Instead, Colton welcomed him with quiet kindness. Grant confessed that envy had hidden beneath his laughter. He feared younger farmers with new ideas because they challenged everything he believed could never change. He apologized sincerely, his voice trembling beneath the warm afternoon sun. Colton accepted the apology without hesitation. He even spent hours showing Grant every part of the irrigation system, sharing notes, measurements, and lessons learned from every mistake. Meredith watched them talking beside the flowing ditches and realized something even more beautiful than record harvests had grown from her son's courage. Compassion had transformed an enemy into a friend. The following season, several neighboring farms introduced similar systems adapted to their own land. Instead of guarding his success, Colton freely shared everything he knew. He believed communities prospered when knowledge spread rather than remained hidden behind pride. Crop yields improved across the region. Local schools invited him to speak about perseverance, innovation, and forgiveness. Children who once feared failure listened carefully as he explained that the greatest discoveries often begin with people laughing at impossible dreams. Years later, visitors no longer remembered the county for struggling farmland. They remembered it as a place where courage changed agriculture because one determined young man refused to let ridicule decide his future. The irrigation ditches that once inspired mockery became symbols of creativity and resilience. Families visiting the farm saw fish gliding beneath clear water while healthy crops flourished above, living proof that extraordinary ideas sometimes appear ordinary only after they succeed. Perhaps the greatest harvest never fit inside a crate or a truck. It lived inside hearts transformed by humility. People who once judged quickly learned to ask questions before reaching conclusions. Young dreamers discovered they no longer feared being different. Parents encouraged children to keep learning instead of following familiar paths simply because everyone else approved. Hope became more contagious than doubt. Before this story comes to its close, we would love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment sharing a moment when believing in yourself, or offering forgiveness to someone else, changed the direction of your life. Your story may inspire another person who needs hope today. As the sun shone brightly across fields overflowing with life, Colton paused beside the gentle flow of water carrying healthy tilapia through the same ditches that had once drawn endless laughter. He smiled, not because he had proven others wrong, but because he had proven that kindness, patience, knowledge, and forgiveness could accomplish far more than anger ever could. His greatest victory was never breaking harvest records. It was refusing to let ridicule harden his heart. In choosing compassion over revenge, persistence over surrender, and hope over despair, he planted something even more enduring than crops. He planted faith that tomorrow can always become better than yesterday when we refuse to stop believing. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. May our community continue reminding one another that the seeds of courage, watered with kindness and patience, can grow into miracles beyond anything the world believes possible.